We've actually started recording, and over to you.
Hi, everyone. Tony Hurd here. I hope it's going all right.
Yeah, Tony, you're welcome to talk.
Okay. Greetings from Newlands. So then why should a newspaper editor, an independent minded newspaper editor, spend time in governance and write a book after more than 2 decades spent in government as an advisor? Very simple. It was just far from boring. I enjoyed every moment, gave me a peek at a totally different world, what we used to call naked power. And you don't come up against naked power in a hurry in the world we live in. Sometimes it was exhilarating, sometimes disturbing, always interesting. And one dealt with just ordinary human beings in a mosaic and a fast changing colors when I joined in 1994, which was quite exciting to see the 2 eras meshing before my eyes. The book started after the book called 8,000 Days, which is 22 years in government. It started after I had finally moved on from government. That's when I started writing. And I did depart from my work in government with indelible insights and memories galore, and new lessons learned way past middle age, which I think is a good thing in life. So I wrote my own account of what life inside government was really like. The human side, the humor, the workload, the allegiances formed and forfeited, plus loads of inspired Shapiro cartoons. Jonathan Shapiro provided me from his huge collection of cartoons, which I appreciate a lot. My personal view, having been there at the coalface of government, is what today's Zoom is about. It outlines some of the thrills and spills that happened in government, and some of which I saw at very close quarters. And I shall happily invite questions when I'm finished. Most of my life has been spent in journalism, going right back to the crucible years of apartheid. I came from a family of journalists, George Hurd, Vida Hurd, and others, way back in my own family history, and became a cub reporter on the Cape Times in mid-1955. Then I went, then proceeded, of course, the country's detour from sanity, reality, and decency, with its gross official insults to human dignity and some actions which were far worse than that, delivered under prime ministers whose blighted years I had labored, 5 of them, in one or other way, to cover with my pen what was going on. Stradum, Verwoerd, Forster, Botha, and finally, seeing some light, thankfully, de Klerk. I met them all, a curse and a blessing to see at close hand what most of them were up to. They used to provide us with our lead story every day, virtually, and with a lot of our cartoons and a lot of our editorials. So out of 4,000 editorials I wrote in the years I was a journalist, a lot of them would have been by kind favor of the South African government that was marching out of step with the rest of humanity, as the London Times put it very well. Full-time journalism had seen me doing almost every story on the book. Finally appointed editor of the Cape Times in 1971 when I was 33. And after 16 years running the country's oldest established daily, and some exciting deviations from the instinctive caution that sometimes is the lot of the establishment press, I was fired. That story, against the background of my journalism, is told in the book The Cape of Storms, published by Raven Press and the University of Arkansas Press, with an introduction by Desmond Tutu. It was a great joy to wish him a happy 90th birthday recently. And that came out in 1990. So I got dismissed from my job in 1987, not very clearly explained. They said it had nothing to do with my interview with Oliver Tambo, for which I was arrested and charged under the Internal Security Act and could have gone to prison for 3 to 10 years, depending on which section they used. So I wrote a freelance column to keep the wolf from the door, and that kept me busy for 7 years after 1987. Then came the offer I couldn't turn down from Minister to be Kader Asmal in 1994. We were on the brink of our new statehood as a free nation, and we still are, but our freedom sometimes runs away with itself. A Nelson Mandela favorite, Kader was serious indeed about doing his substantial bit to change South Africa, and I developed a huge high regard for him. And he seldom took no for an answer. So at a Rondebosch birthday party for my loyal deputy for many years, Gerald Shaw, and I had people around me who made my job so much easier, like Gerald, John Scott, Mike Aycott, any number of marvelous people, Ronnie Morris. Kader at this birthday party for Gerald, I think Gerald was turning 60. He's now about mid-80s. Kader said, "Would you like to join me in my ministry?" And I thought, well, I didn't think that Kader was in the ministry in a religious sense. Then I thought through it. He was going to be a minister in the new Mandela government. So you bet, I thought and said. That and what followed till 2016 is what this new book, 8,000 Days, is about. It covered probably the biggest official delivery of water in the nation's history. I'm talking about millions. We discovered who the first millionth was, the millionth recipient of water. So we flew down to Cape Town and introduced it to Nelson Mandela. Kader was an absolute genius for seeing the romance in trees and water and quoting poetry. Thabo Mbeki is about the only other one I've noticed who would regularly quote poetry, but Kader just loved quoting poetry. And he invested normal humdrum jobs like opening water schemes with an enormous amount of imagination. And Mandela was invariably there at his side when the beautiful blue water came out of the dust in the northern province, as they called it then, or wherever it might be in some rural place. And it was so thrilling to see. I can't tell you how exciting it was and marvelous. So my mainly communications job, I wasn't a water expert, except I surfed for 50 years in the sea. And Kader, when he was appointed, the Daily Maverick, said the only thing he knew about water when he was appointed was that it went with the whiskey. Anyway, Kader was a favorite of Mandela's. And the time that I was there included 8 months when he became Minister of Education. And then I got to know some of the problems that are still plaguing education, probably the biggest issues facing the country, apart from the wealth gap, which is massive. And I then moved on because I was involved with the setting up of the Government Communication and Information System on a cabinet committee, and I moved into the presidency, where I became the dedicated advisor to Dr. Esa Pahad there, who was quite a tough operator. They called him the Rottweiler, and he was the gatekeeper for Thabo Mbeki. But he did an enormous amount of the things that people in power need done, not on the other side of the law, in my opinion, or in any way corruptly. Although he did introduce the Gupta family to South Africa, but long before everything went pear-shaped under Zuma. So it was great to be in the highest office in the land, and this lasted till not long after Zuma took over as president. I was a Thabo Mbeki man, and I knew my days were numbered when Zuma took over in 2009. And by early 2010, there was a mutual sort of appreciation of the fact that my contract, when it ended then, would not be renewed. So I then, funnily enough, I stayed on in government. I was rather pleased to be away from the Zuma presidency, and I'm very glad I haven't had to be infected by that in any serious way, because I'm immensely critical of it. Went and did some work in mineral resources, and I learned lots of the ropes about mining and minerals and how to clean it up and make it environmentally more acceptable than I'd ever known before. In that job, I discovered an enormous amount that I did not know about this powerful but gradually diminishing force in the land, facing huge new challenges of an environmental and other nature. I finally left government in 2016 and wrote pieces mostly about South African media. I got down to collating 8,000 days and later went on to high-level writing and editing part-time on contract for a mining company. But I'm not a mining expert, but I do understand words. The experience inside and outside governance gave me a chance, being on the spot, to look at the personalities, the forces, and the policies of the day. And as Bob Dylan would sing, the times they were changing very fast, as indeed, funnily enough, I think they are now. Incredibly, a racist order, and it was based on race, was being relatively peacefully folded into a non-racial one before my eyes, at least in a formal sense. And I saw it all going on, you know, when one director general would be out and another would be in, and one was white who went out and one was black who came in, or the white one in the case of water affairs, Carter kept on. And I think we can learn from the concept of inclusiveness of people like Nelson Mandela, Carter Asmal, and I think we can say Cyril Ramaphosa. Mandela is a figure, I can talk a lot about Mandela. I met him, you know, many times, over a dozen times, and sometimes in interviews and long periods where I could talk to him. But he's a figure that a lucky country might get every 500 years. As a minister in those days, put it to me. And I think, you know, maybe 300, 500, do we know? But all I know is a man of destiny. All I can say is, never even countenance, abandoning the spirit, if not all the detail, of that amazing man of destiny. Take note, I would say, to those who would do this. And he is discounted by some, increasingly in some quarters, mainly young people who didn't realize what the hell he went through over 27 and a half years in prison. They tend not to have the same adulation for him that you find globally. A friend of mine was in Mauritius not long ago, and there was a huge Mandela monument there. You go to Westminster Square in London, and you'll see there his picture there with Cromwell and others, General Smuts. So I developed special warmth and respect for the hardworking and brilliant and sometimes irascible Carter Asmal, and indeed respect indeed for his lifelong comrade in his work, and eagle eyes spotting all sorts of errors, spotting all sorts of policy convolutions that could come before the minister. And she was so helpful. She didn't work in the office, but she was always a presence, Louise. And I really do salute her as she gets older like me. I felt a growing respect for Thabo Mbeki. He was a shy man. He didn't communicate was by slapping you on the back and getting emotional or getting demonstrative. And he did make some big mistakes. An occupational hazard, I believe, for high-profile leadership, particularly intellectuals, I think. If you look around the history, intellectuals tend to want to have their own way with their own pet subjects. The incredible HIV/AIDS debate, I'd call it a debacle, was the nadir of his incumbency. I had the unpleasant job of having to try to sell it. And after a lunch with the science editor of The Economist, a chap called Carr, trying to say, well, look, you know, can we afford it? All those arguments, some of which were partially valid. I gave up. I realized that one wasn't going to fly, and it didn't. Fortunately, the years have produced other priorities and medical ones as well, as we know so well. But it was a very difficult time for anyone advising a president. Our real growth rate, of course, reaching 5%, was a high point, and a very high point, although we needed another few percent consistently to really get to grips with the widening wealth gap in South Africa, which is still a huge problem. We've got to deal with that. If we don't deal with that, we face more social unrest, and we know what that means in KZN not long ago, and in parts of Gauteng and elsewhere. So we got to deal with that. Yet, you know, Mbeki's positive grand plans, I'd call them, such as promoting sustainable development through NEPAD, which was originally going to be called MAP, M-A-P, and political renaissance in an African century, which is a bold thought and, in a way, an optimistic dream, if that century comes, did something for a once subject continent, a once dominated continent, its sense of self-confidence and hopefully better prospects lay ahead one day. The jury is still out, I think, and sometimes the future for Africa can look dismal. Witness the current pathetic level of vaccination in Africa. It's about 5%. We're at about 25%, with few exceptions in Africa, one or two countries. I think Morocco is one in combating COVID-19 for whatever reason, you know, supply, the vaccine being hogged and hoarded elsewhere and all that stuff. But that worries me, because that must be rectified, since it threatens the world of the vaccinated. All of us who've been vaccinated twice, threatens our world. Mbeki's stand-in successor, of course, was Kgalema Motlanthe. He maintained a level of dignity, probity, and respect while he was there for a rather short time. And then, of course, his successor, Jacob Zuma, and I worked for him for several months with a growing sense of disturbance in my mind. He belonged in the basement of the areas of dignity, probity, and respect of his immediate predecessor, Motlanthe, and of course, those who went before. Suffice it to say that chapter 32 of my book on Zuma, simply the title of that chapter is State Demolition with New Keepers. And of course, I do deal with Cyril Ramaphosa briefly, because he'd only just, you know, he was settling into the saddle when this book came out, but favorably, because I don't think there's any other national show around that is as pragmatic and sensible as Cyril Ramaphosa. So a final remark, and then we'll have a look at some pictures, and then we'll go ahead, and I hope we'll have questions. I found that insights and memories in both private and public sectors, the fact that I looked at both private sector through the media and the public sector through government service as an advisor, can be most instructive for the challenging times we live in today. Those insights and those memories inform us today. They're not irrelevant to today. For instance, I saw the cloud of corruption almost looking like a hand against the horizon, so small. in school feeding, travel gates, and Sarafina 2 scandals. They were relatively small compared with what we've had, with the billions being stolen from the poor that we've seen in the Zuma years. And then as we entered the Mbeki era, there was an arms scandal that will not go away. I must just mention this, that Frank Chikani, the Director General, called me in once. He said, do you think, this is many years ago, it started in 1999. And he said, Tony, do you think this arms scandal will go away? He was very worried about the effects of it on probity in government. And, or not, I just said, I don't think it's going to go away unless dealt with properly. And it was not dealt with properly. A commission that looked into it, Seriti Commission, was a damp squib, putting it kindly. And I hope that there'll be an enormous amount of disclosure when the Zondo Commission reports very soon over state capture and a lot of those things that we should be thoroughly ashamed of. Now we are reaping the whirlwind for not, to quote a remark made to me by a very respected United States academic from New England, Bob Rothberg. Some of you, I think, will remember him. He just said, Tony, if you had dealt immediately and effectively with the early stages of corruption, we'd be much further ahead in South Africa. There's one or two arrests did take place and one or two people sat, but to be honest, not enough. And I think what members of parliament got away with when it came to Travelgate is scandalous. So that's my story so far. I welcome questions after. We can have a quick look at a few pictures, if that's okay.
Thank you, Tony. I'm now going to share the screen and then you can talk to the pictures that you have.
That's the whole lot. And then one by one, let's have a quick look. There's only about 11 of them, and I hope you find them of some interest.
So
they're from the book.
That's obviously with you, with Madiba. Do you want to talk a little bit to that?
Yeah, I can't see it on my screen, but
hang on.
That's the cover of the book.
No, everybody needs to see it.
Okay. I can probably go through my mind and remember them, but anyway.
It should all.
Because they did come up earlier when we
They did come up. Now they're not coming up. Give me 1 second. Let me get it right.
All right. Sure.
Okay. Let's try again. Oh, they're not showing up here. Right there.
Now they're across the top.
Is the first one showing?
No, but if others can see it, I can describe it.
Could someone just respond whether you can see the picture?
Yeah, Diana, I mean, the picture is coming up, but it's coming out black.
Yeah.
We are sharing it, but I don't know why it's doing that. I don't know if you can right click on the photo and just see if there's anything. Yeah, I'm not quite sure. There's view options at the top. I wonder if that makes any.
Let's just try. Otherwise, I'm going to send them to someone and you can do it because obviously something's wrong. Let's just see.
Yeah, there's a setting. I mean, maybe just send them to me and I'll see if I can share it.
Okay.
They did come out when we did a quick test.
We did a test earlier.
We can carry on with questions.
Just chat in the meantime, Tony, and I will. And I'll get them. If you want to just talk in the interim, Tony.
Sure. I'll just. Do you want me to gas away? I'm quite good at that.
Yeah, that's fine.
People tell me to do it a bit too much. Okay. You know the main issues with Thabo Mbeki were Zimbabwe, HIV, crime, and the arms deal. And I've dealt with the arms deal a bit, and I've dealt with HIV a bit. Crime was a big issue, and there was a rather difficult moment when the presidency under Mbeki couldn't quite get their head around the fact that whether crime was getting so bad for everyone. But, you know, it just took the death of Lucky Dube, I think was his name, and prominent people of all colors who were subject to crime. And then I think the penny dropped, and I remember drafting speeches saying it hasn't been nipped in the bud. We still have a huge problem there. Zimbabwe, I give Thabo Mbeki a much better rating than HIV/AIDS. He was dealing, the actual chapter heading in the book is snake handling. He was dealing with a snake in the grass, and that was Robert Mugabe, who would do a deal, and he did a deal. Thabo Mbeki, just before he left office, he got a deal. I found myself in the Tuynhuys at a cocktail party to welcome the new Prime Minister of Zimbabwe, who had a nominal post that Mugabe then set about emasculating, and then he really basically tore up the agreement that he had with Mbeki. Very difficult job dealing with someone like that in politics. And, you know, if I were to rate Thabo standing there on HIV, I'd give him 2 out of 10, if that. And on Zimbabwe, I'd give him 4 or 5 out of 10. The problem was elsewhere, and he battled hard to get Mugabe to accept that agreement. And in fact, it all unraveled. And when Zuma took over, so one of his advisors said, well, he was going to deal with Mugabe. Well, I didn't see any signs of that. You know, there was always one thing in Thabo's career that has to be remembered is his classic speech. It was a masterpiece. I am an African. His speech in Parliament on the acceptance of the new Constitution, as I recall, in 1966, was just a piece of art, and it was almost sort of shivered in excitement when you heard the way, in his quiet, undramatic way, he presented that speech. I am an African. It'll go down in history. I was actually overseas at a conference in the Netherlands, at a media conference, and I suddenly saw this all over the newspapers. And because it was an international media conference, almost all of the papers had it. And that was a test of the brilliance of that speech. We had some really funny moments. And one was when there was an outbreak, we thought, of anthrax in Tuynhuys in the presidency in Cape Town, next to Parliament. And that's where the presidency operates, in the Tuynhuys in Cape Town. And they found right next to my office, in a walk-in cupboard, an envelope with white powder. And in no time, ambulances were picking up all MPs, all were mainly presidency people, but a few MPs and ministers who'd been having a ministerial meeting, where they all were taken off to hospital, had their clothes confiscated, and checked for anthrax. But Frank Chikane, the Reverend Frank Chikane, an evangelical minister who was the sort of father confessor to almost everyone in the presidency, because there was a lot of problems to deal with there. He just sat at his desk, and he was one of 2 people I knew of in Tuynhuys who didn't leave their desk when there was this Gadarene rush to the hospital, Christian Barnard Hospital there in Cape Town. And Frank just said, I know who's looking after me. Well, it turned out not to be anthrax. It was white powder, probably sent in by some joker. But it was quite an exciting moment to see Buthelezi and others being rushed off to hospital and then running around in green sort of doctor's outfits for the best part of the rest of the day if they didn't have new clothing brought to them in Parliament. That's, I don't know if you'd like to start some questions or not, or whether you'd like me to keep talking, which I can do if you like.
I can try for the photos.
Yeah. Please
Carry
do.
on.
See?
Can you see that?
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
better.
Got it.
Yes.
Do you want me to start on that picture to start with?
Yeah, I think so.
Okay. Nelson Mandela, 2005, in retirement in his Cape Town residence in Bishop's Court. We went to visit. My brother in Canada, who's a journalist, he said, "Oh, I'm coming out to South Africa, my elder brother," and you always obey your elder brothers, right? He said, "Just fix an interview with one Mandela for the whole family." I said, "Well, not so easy," but I knew Jake Sherwell, who was chair of the Nelson Mandela Foundation then, and he fixed it. We found ourselves as a family, and our domestic worker, it was really quite moving. You know, this sort of group, just the herds and the family turning up, Mandela chatting in Xhosa to the domestic worker, Elizabeth Sibozo. And then my granddaughter, who you'll see there, got very shy when her father, Steve, who took a lot of the pictures, but not this one, Steve Pike, he runs a Wavescape surfing website. He brought Ella, aged 4, to Mandela. You know, we all greeted him one by one, and Ella presented him with a little piece of paper and that, but she got too shy. So Steve comforted her and took her right up to Mandela, who put his hand out and took her wrist, and he managed to banish the shyness to some extent. But I think that's a classic picture of Mandela and children and his empathy for other human beings.
Next one, Stacey.
Okay. Okay, that's Thabo Mbeki. He's a very undemonstrative man. And he's often made speeches saying, sorry, it's gone back to the other picture. But Thabo Mbeki is, at the time of the 1999 Rugby World Cup, my son-in-law, Steve Pike, who was in that earlier picture, he managed to get an interview with Thabo, and there was going to be a major 1999 Rugby World Cup. And so Steve brought along a rugby jersey to put Thabo Mbeki in it. Now, that's not easy. Even on one of his birthdays, I remember his handler saying, "Look, he doesn't even want a birthday cake. You know, he doesn't like show." And he's actually a very shy man. But we coaxed him, and a very unusual picture emerged, which is Thabo Mbeki cheering when a notional try was scored. And I think it shows him in a very different light to the one that people know him in. Thank you. Yeah, just very briefly, the next one's coming up. At the top, I found myself in a demonstration for freedom of expression with my two daughters. On the left is my elder daughter, the dark-haired one, Vicky, who's a faculty manager at University of Cape Town at CHED, and Janet, who's managing editor of the Mail and Guardian. And my daughter Janet gave me that T-shirt when I got, more or less the time I got arrested. It's a journalism theme. And she gave, when I got arrested for publishing Tambo, which was highly illegal, he hadn't been quoted in South Africa for 25 years. She gave me 3 little monkeys, see no evil, hear no evil, etc. And it was just at one of those occasions when there were quite a lot of issues about free expression in the new order. And below, just meeting Mandela when I published my book in 1990 in the Vineyard Hotel. He liked the Vineyard Hotel, as do a lot of people. And I was chatting to him there. He gave me a very good interview, which went right around the world. And I found that anything written about Mandela or Winnie Mandela would immediately make the newspapers when I was doing an internationally syndicated column. One I did on Sam Njomo in Namibia didn't have the same resonance, and it was only published in a few newspapers. Thank you.
Next one, Stacey.
Yeah, just yeah. That's how that's me and my 4 children. Because it's a personal book. Janet and Vicky, I've told you who they are, and Dylan, who's now a property portfolio manager with a property company, and Pasqua, which means Easter in Italian. She was born at Easter, although the significance didn't go much beyond that, but people always confused by her name, Pasqua, and she is an e-education person who is moving through into a career, as they all are, closely in touch with the new electronic era that, whether we like it or not, we've got to live through. And there's just a picture of me in office, in Kadam Asmal's office at the bottom, in what used to be the Hendrik Verwoerd building. Thank goodness by the time I joined, it was changed to 120 Plain Street. Thank you. That was just briefly the presidency organogram. They rather overplayed my significance there, but it shows the president and then Issa Pahad, his key handler, and a very close friend. Issa was best man at his wedding in Farnham Castle in England, believe it or not. And when I visited the place, when I worked for Tambo, they were very excited. They've got pictures of him and his dear wife up there, and they were very proud of the fact that Tambo and Becky got married in Farnham Castle. And it was really very touching. And then myself as the advisor then to Issa, but I extended my activities throughout the presidency. At one stage, and there was Zuma, deputy president. It could have been Gacha Buthelezi. If people cast their minds back, they wanted to offer the job of deputy president when Mandela left and Thabo Mbeki took over to Buthelezi, but the negotiations broke down over, I think, who would be premier in KZN or something. But can you imagine if he'd been deputy president then? The mind does boggle a bit, but yes, Thabo Mbeki apparently was looking at it. And then the advisors at the bottom, Mojanka Gumbi on the left, Titus Mafolo, and then Wiseman Kuhlu and Sue van der Merwe, who actually, in my opinion, they played a much more central role in the presidency than I did. Thank you. That was bringing water to the village of Chris Hani near Koffenwaba. One of the first things Carter did, he brought a water scheme to this rural village near Koffenwaba. That was the home of Chris Hani, and that was the premier of the Eastern Cape. And what was his name? I can't even remember. Chris Hani's name. Raymond Mhlaba, who was rather flamboyantly dressed on the right, and the bodyguard behind Mhlaba's head, you'll see, ever-present bodyguards. Those ministers had to be looked after. And no one should complain about security upgrades as long as they are modest and not fire pools and things like we had to go through with in Kano. Anyway, and Kada grinning, but in fact the two of them, Muslaba and Kada, had a flaming row. And I'm standing in the background watching it all, as advisors sometimes do. And just about the arrangements generally, you know, things were a bit late and quite dilatory in the local arrangements. But there it is. It's quite an interesting picture of Kada and Ray Mhlaba and being watched in the background by myself. Thank you. That's the last cartoon, Zapiro cartoon in my book. And it's Thuli Madonsela wrapping up the Nkandla report saying, "I rest my case," by Zapiro. Need we say more? Thank you.
It's at the end of it now. No.
That's in 2010. Zapiro depicted Mandela as coming out of prison in 1990. And then looking at 2010, getting second thoughts about how things were going. And those little items there indicate corruption and crime and all the issues that still had not gone away. And it was quite a cutting but effective commentary by Zapiro, something he's so good at. Thank you. And that's just the cover of my book, 8,000 Days. And the subhead, just for information, is Mandela, Mbeki and Beyond, the inside story of an editor in the corridors of power. That appears below where you can't see it, but that's the book. And it's around in bookshops, not in profusion because the COVID pandemic knocked a lot of the sales of many, but it's still around. And if anyone's interested, my email and phone number is known to your organization, and I'll happily supply if anyone needs any. Thank you. Oh, that just shows when it comes to AIDS leadership, Tambo and Becky trying to fill Madiba's shoes and not making a very good job of filling the shoes. I think it's quite funny. Politics can be very cruel, and Zapiro knows how to turn the screw. And then that is depicting Kada Asmal after he had died. And he had said that South Africa and the ANC was losing their moral compass, and how ethics and humanitarianism, humanism and accountability, etc., have to a certain extent been overtaken by less happy events. And he died in 2011, and that was Zapiro's tribute to Kada.
Thank you, Tony, and thank you for those wonderful photographs. I mean, drawings by Zapiro as well.
Yeah.
Are there any questions from anyone?
Yeah, I would like to make a comment, if I may.
Sure.
Hilda. Must I open the picture or not? Not important.
Yes, let's see your face.
Okay, wait a moment. Where's this blessed thing here? There. Okay. I would just like to add to what you said about, you mentioned Sarafina. Now, in 1994, I didn't have TV, I don't think. I was listening to the radio news, and I heard that the government was going to give 14 million rand to take Sarafina to the schools.
Mm.
And I thought to myself, I cannot believe what I'm listening to. Now, I've been in the opera company for 33 years, Nico Milan.
Oh, yeah.
The government, together with education department and whatever else, in Western Province, I don't know how it all worked, gave us 23 million rand annually, which covered the orchestra, the full orchestra, and any visiting conductors or whatever, the English drama company, the Afrikaans drama company, the opera company, the soloist, the chorus, the lighting, the whole lighting, and everything that goes with opera, the ballet company, the maintenance of the entire building, the canteen, the maintenance of the entire, for 23 million rand a year. And now the government was giving 14 million rand to take Serafina to schools. We also used to go to schools. That was part of our job. We went to schools as well as performing and so on. And I thought, my God, we're in for corruption in a big scale. That's all I want to say.
Thank you, Hilda.
I can comment on that if you like.
Please
Please
do.
do.
Unless we take, yeah, thank you very much.
No, I mean, it was an absolute disgrace.
Yeah, it was over the top. You know, ministers in Nkosazana Zuma had that idea. And it was, you know, if one's charitable, it was an attempt to play a role way beyond just entertainment and to get the youth to be careful, you know, when it came to things that could give them AIDS. But ministers mustn't get too many brilliant ideas, particularly costly ones. They should let it permeate up from the advisors and the departments and that, and not just run with fads. And it turned out to be a very exorbitantly expensive, and I'm afraid there was a hint of corruption, and the
hint.
Public Protector Selby Bakwa looked into it, and he was critical. But it was early days, and this is Brave New World, and I think it was way beyond what should have happened. As it happened, Thabo Mbeki and Kada Asmal made speeches in Parliament about whether a minister should resign if given, in that case, as happened, you know, sort of faulty advice by their officials. But it's a complex and disturbing thing that was a sign of corruption to come. Yes.
A sign.
Thank you for that. Anybody else wanting to add anything to the presentation or bring something to it?
Well, I just thought it was blatant corruption. That's what
No, but I think the
blatant corruption.
The Selby Bakwa report did disclose that, you know, there was supposed to be buses bought to bus people around, but it was very, very, I think it was basically dishonest.
Well, Cape Ab also had buses.
Yeah.
So, I mean, you know, for 23 million a year, that covered absolutely every aspect.
Yeah.
And now 14 million to take some little play to schools. I mean, absurd. Absurd.
Yeah, it was the flamboyant days, and it was way over the top. I agree with you.
So we have something in the chat from Colin Goldberg, and it's as a response to Amanda putting on the blurb about your book, about your inside story of the editor in the corridors of power. So Colin says the sad thing is that unfortunately people vote the wrong people into office because of hero and idol worship, family members and friends, instead of identifying fit and competent people and voting for same, which would have been the correct thing to do. Thank you, Colin.
Yeah, I think if you look at the early days of the Mandela appointments and quite a few of Thabo Mbeki's appointments, a best person for the job was often the case. Billy Cobbett in housing, any number of really good people brought in to the administration. But I'm afraid the Tammany Hall type corruption did set in, and it wasn't only in the Zuma time. You know, when you've got a party wanting to hold on to power that they fought for quite valiantly over many years, often the party comes first and the interests of the country second. And I can only say that I don't disagree with that view. It did happen too much. And but I saw some excellent people. I'll give you one example. Mike Muller, the Director General of Water, is an outstanding person. He's now a professor at Wits, and he was appointed on merit, a white, and he got the job over a young black guy who was put up for the same job. So there was a lot of nepotism, and then that grew, you know, into a criminal direction under Zuma, in my opinion.
Thank you. Anybody else would like to add anything to what we've spoken about?
May I ask, Tony, do you think that the DA is going to form a collaboration with the Freedom Front, or which parties do you think they would go with? Because they're going to lose a lot of coloureds now with this patron, what's it called? The Patron Alliance.
Yeah, patriotical. Yeah, and the Good Party, they could lose to
And the Good Party.
You know, the Good.
But I don't think Good Party is going to join with DA.
No,
Even if DA wants to join with them, I don't think they will join with DA.
Well, the DA, you know, I'm an old prog. I was there. I broke the news to Sir Willis Graaf that the progs had broken in 1959. And, you know, I'm in the Jan Stadler, Colin Eglin sort of category.
Yes.
And they were very principled for many years. But I think that a little bit of opportunism, opening the doors too wide to what I would describe as the far right or the right, has been a problem. I don't know if you remember at one stage, you know, the doors were opened in the direction of bringing in more conservative people. I don't know who the DA will coalesce with, but I am a fervent supporter of the idea that we should enter, rather like Germany at the moment, rather coalitions of the best people, tried and tested people, best person governments. But we're not there yet. And I think the DA, if they control nationally about, you know, 20% of the population, that's a substantial block to throw in the direction of rational government, and could make all the difference if Cyril Ramaphosa is under pressure within his own party. And then there could be the emergence of a national government as a result of coalescing. So I think we're going to see much more coalition forming. Who will, you know, win and coalesce and run Cape Town or other local areas depends on the circumstances. You know, there's Pretoria, there's Johannesburg, there's Cape Town, and many other smaller places. So I don't know. I think it's up to Steenhuisen, I suppose, and his supporters. I just worry a little bit if any party gets watered down to such an extent that it loses its own soul.
Can I ask you something? How come that Patricia de Lille is able to belong to two parties? She works for the ANC, she's in the ANC, and she's the head of the Good Party. How can she be in both parties?
Well, you know, the president can appoint from outside his own party. She wouldn't, as far as I know, she wouldn't be a member of the ANC, but she's now running the Good Party. So, I mean, one will have to check that. I don't think she'd be a member. She was the PAC in any case.
No, but she is in the ANC as well. I think she's in
the cabinet.
But yes, in the cabinet.
Yeah, but when Mandela came in and others, we've had chap called Liebenberg and others were ministers of finance originally. So you can have others brought in, and you know, I don't think that it means it ties you to the caucus of the ANC. The caucus of the ANC is the party in parliament and the party in power in South Africa. It's the caucus in parliament of that. I think that'd have to be cleared up. I don't see her as an ANC member. I see her as a member of another party who's been asked to serve in the cabinet.
Oh, I see.
And that's how I see it. And, you know, she should be asked.
Oh, I didn't know that they could do that.
No,
I wasn't
no,
aware that you can be in one party and then be working for another party.
yeah, well, you know, Buthelezi was in the cabinet for a long time as Home Affairs and various other jobs in the cabinet, but he wasn't a member of the ANC. And there were others. There were two non-ANC ministers of finance when we first became, when we changed to, Mandela came out and that, he appointed two. There were others who were appointed from outside the ANC. It's not impossible, but it surprises me in a way that Cyril Ramaphosa hasn't gone a bit further in that direction, because I think you can only run South Africa with the best available people, like they're trying to do with ESCOM. We'll have to see how that works out.
Now, sorry, let someone else talk. Sorry.
Can I say something?
Yes, with pleasure.
I'm talking from London, England.
Welcome, Lord. Nice to have you with us.
Just after the Second World War, my late aunt and uncle went to South Africa and did very well in Johannesburg. Both had businesses there, and they invited me and my late wife to go and join them. But unfortunately, my wife had family, mother, father, and sisters that she would not go. A question was, when you said about the buses, surely I've always thought that South Africa was a very wealthy country with diamonds and gold. Surely they could have set up some sort of system and paid for it by the selling of gold and diamonds to the world. What is your point of view on that?
Well, you know, mining as a percentage of the economy has dropped substantially.
Oh, right, right.
Except platinum, and that is doing very well, and Anglo is getting rid of coal and being more involved in platinum and that. But yes, I mean, I remember writing editorials for the Cape Times many years ago when the gold price started going up, saying this is a golden opportunity for us to take the proceeds and to develop the country more effectively. It's a good principle, but you know, the challenge is enormous. We've had serious state capture, which has cost the country in the billions. We've had all sorts of new commitments, power generation and infrastructure needs. So it's a huge order, and I think it can only be tackled by some sort of national government. That's my view. But yes, you know, those are diamonds and gold, although they don't play the same dominant role that they did in those days, and they don't. Manufacturing and that, you know, and even a thing like tourism is roaring ahead once we get our lockdown sorted out. So yeah, it's just a good principle. I don't disagree with you, to use what you've got and not to let it all be dissipated either by waste or going out of the country. You've got to keep as much of it in the country as possible, so you can develop and produce the housing and the conditions of life that will start making a major dent on the wealth gap, because I think that's a big issue.
Thank you very much.
Okay, thank
Can I ask
Can
Oh,
I
go ahead.
ask a question?
Yes, sure.
you.
Just want to ask about manufacturing. In the past, we had a lot of manufacturing in this country, and it gave a lot of employment to so many people. And now I fail to understand why that can't be reinstated instead of importing from China or wherever.
Yeah. No, look, when you buy toys or clothing, they're invariably from China. That's true. But, you know, it's a question of price, question of quality. I don't know if the Chinese stuff is, you know, all that durable. But it's a question of choice, you see. I mean, you can't force people to buy South African. You can encourage them to do that. But I can't disagree with your basic sentiments.
Yeah, but most of the clothing factories in South Africa don't exist anymore. But I think that's a worldwide thing.
Yeah,
like,
it is. Oh, yes.
You know, like if I may say with America, it's all very well Trump saying, oh, the trade war and we are going to have more factories and so on. But the point is, if you have factories, say in America or whatever, there are the unions. So you've got so many rules. You know, take off the Jewish holidays, take off the Muslim holidays, so many hours a day, sick leave, medical aid, blah, 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 strikes. In China, you don't have that. You don't have that. That's why the stuff can be exported so cheaply, and that's why people buy the Chinese junk. Most of it is junk. But I wanted to ask you something. About a week or 10 days ago, something like that, I read or heard on the TV very briefly that Ramaphosa had gone into these huge black churches and was dishing out money to the congregants. And as far as I'm concerned, I think that is actually bribery to get them to, in the same way as he went into Soweto and nobody wanted to look at him, and because of the lack of electricity. And then he said, no, we are cancelling the 320 million rand debt that you've got for electricity. It's cancelled now. Today we're cancelling that, vote for us. Now, what do you think of that sort of thing? I think it's disgusting.
Yeah, Ramaphosa is not the only person who would indulge in that. People can come and eat your hamburgers that you give them and that, but vote for someone else.
Yeah,
so there's still a free vote. But
but how can you go into a church and start handing out money to the congregants? I mean,
well, I hadn't heard that. I hadn't heard.
No,
that.
I heard it, and I thought that the DA would take it up in court. That it's
no,
bribery.
well, you can't go around, taking a satchel of money and just handing it out. But
because they said, I heard it on TV, and they said, had he given a donation to the church, that would have been different. But the fact that he went into the church and was just willy-nilly handing out money to congregants makes it a different thing.
Yeah, but who said
whether
that?
it's true or not, that's what I heard on the TV.
Yeah, but
or
who
somewhere,
said that?
or read it.
To be honest, I don't believe it. I don't think he'd be that silly. He's a very, very intelligent man. He knows that that's a public act, and if he did it, there'll be consequences.
Consequences.
Yeah.
Well, anyway, I hope that it wasn't true, but that's what I heard, and that's, I don't know.
Well, I really hope it's wrong, because I'd have never put him in the category of corruption. That, there were very serious attempts to stick a corruption label on him after 2017 when he became president of the ANC, and those didn't work. And if Ramaphosa turns out to be corrupt now, well, then we don't have much at the top to rescue us. And I can't, politicians do make promises all over. Lyndon Johnson in Texas was well known for that sort of way of operating, and other people in places like in the South, particularly, in Tammany Hall in Boston and that. But those are promises, some of which are not corruptly made. But if you walk into a church and just hand out money just before people are going to vote, that's unacceptable.
Tony, thank you so much for all the anecdotes that you've given us, apart from your book as well. It's been quite a fascinating morning, and I'm sure that everybody's enjoyed being with you. But it is after 11 now, so we will have to end the session. Should anybody else have anything to say, last chance now. Otherwise, we're going to just thank Tony so much for being with us and let you know that the musical concert this afternoon is
it's in the chat, Diana.
in the chat. Yeah.
John Williams, I think it's
Williams
John
and
Williams.
Steven Spielberg Orchestra Live. It's a complete concert with John, and it's really a very good concert. So hopefully you'll join us at 2 p.m. out South Africa time this afternoon. For those of you who are overseas, you'll know what time to come on. But thank you to Tony, and stay well, stay safe, everybody. Yiddish tomorrow morning for those of you who are joining, and the program will go out shortly for next week.
Thanks for having me. Thanks for having
attending.
me. Thank you.
It's a great pleasure, and thanks for being with us.
Okay. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye. Is there one more question I can ask?
Yeah, Tony's still here. You're welcome to do so.
Finally, what does the South African people and the government think of our Prime Minister, our Conservative Prime Minister in England,
Boris Johnson.
Boris Johnson?
I think they
Some people think he's fantastic, and some people think he's a disaster.
Yeah.
So we'll have to put up with him for another few years.
Yeah, you know, Brexit and that, they say all that's left of Brexit, you know, although it really is just a plan in his mind that is still not even fashioned properly. But he's a bit of a showman, but I'd say he is far more intelligent than Mr. Trump. And he was head of the Oxford Union. He's got a way with words, and maybe he's too rhetorical. But apparently they were saying, I read The Guardian quite a lot. They were saying that he still enjoys dominant support in the country.
Absolutely.
That's what they say. And, you know, people go for a politician with odd features like his hair looking like he's been dragged through a bush or something.
That's right.
You know, and in a way, it sort of plays up to people's potential boredom with politics. He makes politics more interesting. I'm not a great fan, and friends of mine in England are beside themselves with frustration, because, you know, the Brexit thing is, you know, I mean, all those lorry drivers who, partly because of Brexit, are not available to bring goods to the British people at the moment, you know, that's caused enormous unhappiness. And various other things have happened, which, you know, but he's clever, he's flamboyant, but he's sometimes a bit odd.
Yeah, he is training a lot more drivers in England.
Yes. Yeah.
And he hopes that Brexit will succeed, and he wants the English people to be lorry drivers. You want them to get to work.
Yeah.
Find things to do.
Well,
we're not shortage of food, not at the moment. Things are ticking over.
Okay, well, that's good to hear.
About Christmas will be weak on toys and various other things. But the main thing is that ships are stacked up in Lowestoft, our harbour, where the lorry drivers just can't drive away enough goods.
Yeah.
That's basically what's happening.
Thanks for that on-the-spot assessment.
But it's not Trump anymore, not to us. We got this new, new president.
That's right, Biden.
Biden, yes.
Yeah, but our president, you were saying, you know, with the question also was, what did the South Africans think of them? Well, you know, we'll get on with anyone in power there, you know, democratically elected, obviously. And when we needed help on several occasions, Cyril Ramaphosa will just pick up the phone and talk to him, and he'd probably take the call.
Good.
Thanks for that question.
Do you remember the lifting of the red list? Well, Ramaphosa just phoned phoned Johnson, and it was
not Johnson.
Also with science behind it. Maybe the medical fraternity gave a lot of information.
Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you.
Thanks so much. Thanks for your question.
I'll try to get off now. I can't really, I'm trying to work out what to get, but that's my problem.
You just, at your bottom right-hand side of your screen, it was, if you click there, it would say leave.
Leave.
Yeah. Okay. I'll have to try to sort that out.
Thanks, everybody.
Nice. Nice talking to you
Okay.
from London.
Yes.
And the concert's at 2 o'clock, yes?
At 2 o'clock. So I think it's 1 o'clock your time,
1 p.m. London.
1 p.m. London time.
1 p.m. London time.
1 p.m. London time. Yes.
Okay. Interesting discussion this morning.
Good. I'm glad you enjoyed it. Thanks, everyone. We'll see you either this afternoon or tomorrow or next week. I'm ending the session now.